ever dreamed of working in the UK, maybe even living there for a bit.
Who hasn't, right? Especially with how globally connected everything is these days.
Well, get this. Someone sent us information on the UK's HPI Visa.
HPI.
Yeah, it stands for High Potential Individual Visa. And let me tell you, it's one of the most sought-after visas out there.
Oh, I bet. It sounds pretty exclusive.
It definitely is. But here's the catch. You only get 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so a pretty limited window to make your mark.
Exactly. So today we're going to break down what makes this visa unique.
And more importantly, how you can actually maximize your time if you're lucky enough to get one.
Music to my ears. Because I'm already intrigued. This HPI visa, it's all about attracting top global talent to the UK, right?
You got it. The UK is laser focused on bringing in the best and brightest from around the world.
And this visa is their way of rolling out the red carpet, so to speak.
Right, but it's not just about any kind of talent. They're looking for those with massive potential, hence the name high potential individual.
It's interesting, though. One thing that really jumped out at me from this document is that where you went to university matters more than what you actually studied.
Now that's fascinating. It's not your typical visa application where you're highlighting specific skills or work experience. They're using global university rankings as a primary indicator of your potential.
Yeah, like they have these incredibly detailed lists of eligible universities going back several years. I even saw big names from Asia on there, like the National University of Singapore. But hold on, Orno UK universities?
Uh-huh. You notice that too. That's a really interesting point, isn't it? And it actually reveals a lot about the HPI visa's purpose. It's not about keeping UK graduates in the country or anything like that. They're specifically looking to attract talent from outside the UK. Fresh perspectives, new ways of thinking.
So UK graduates, they have other options then.
They do. There's a graduate visa, which lets them stick around and work for up to 2 years after they finish their studies.
Good to know. Okay, so back to the HPI. Let's say you're a recent grad from one of these top-ranked global universities. You're thinking, this is my ticket to the UK.
Hold your horses, because even with that diploma, there's more to it.
Right. You can't just waltz in with a fancy degree, can you?
Exactly. They want to make sure you're not just book smart, but that you're also prepared for life in the UK.
So what you're saying, even if you graduate top of your class, you still need to prove you can speak English?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Even if your degree was taught in English, they want to see that you can communicate effectively, integrate into society and really hit the ground running.
Makes sense. What else?
Well, remember how we said high potential is key here?
Yeah.
Well, part of that is showing you can support yourself financially, too.
So high potential also means having a healthy bank account.
You got it. They're looking for a minimum of £12,270 in savings.
Okay, so you've aced your exams, impressed them with your English skills, and convinced them you can manage your money. What's next? What can you actually do with this HPI visa once you have it?
That's where things get really interesting. You have the freedom to work for most employers. You can start your own business. You can even bring your family along.
Okay, wow. So they really are rolling out the red carpet. But we can't forget those time limitations we talked about earlier.
Right. 2 to 3 years might seem like a decent chunk of time, but it can go by in a flash, especially when you're in a new country exploring all these new opportunities.
Exactly. So we're going to explore those limitations and what your options are once that 2 to 3 year mark hits. But first, let's dive a bit deeper into these exciting opportunities this visa unlocks. All right, so picture this. You've touched down at Heathrow, got that HPI visa stamped in your passport, ready to make the most of this incredible opportunity.
I can practically smell the fish and chips already.
Huh. Well, before we get ahead of ourselves, this isn't a visa that ties you to a specific job, you know? You've got a lot of freedom here.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the most exciting things about the HPI visa. It's like a blank canvas. You get to decide what you want to paint.
Exactly. But how do you actually maximize those 2 to 3 years? Where do you even begin?
Well, for starters, don't underestimate the power of preparation.
You're not talking about packing an umbrella, are you?
Huh. Well, that too. The UK weather can be unpredictable, to say the least. But I'm talking about getting your ducks in a row before you even board that plane.
Okay, so dotting our I's and crossing our T's, what does that look like in this context?
The UK's immigration system, they're meticulous. They want to see everything in order. So carefully review those guidelines, gather all your documents, and don't hesitate to ask for clarification on anything that seems unclear.
Better safe than sorry, right? Especially when it comes to something as important as a visa.
100%. And here's a pro tip from someone who's seen their fair share of deadline panic. Don't wait until the last minute.
Oh, you'd be surprised how many people do.
Oh, I know, I know. But seriously, get the ball rolling early, especially if you need things like proof of English language proficiency or financial records. Those things can take time.
Absolutely. You don't want to jeopardize your chances by cutting it too close. Okay, so we've covered the importance of thorough preparation. What else? Are there any common misconceptions about the HPI visa that tend to trip people up?
Oh, there are a few. One big one is about bringing family members along. Your partner, your kids.
Right, because the visa lets you bring dependents, right?
It does, but here's the thing. Even if your partner or children are already in the UK on a different visa, they can't just automatically hop onto your HPI visa.
Wait, really? So even if you're already a happy family in the UK, if one of you gets the HPI, everyone else has to go through a whole new visa application process.
Yep, that's right. Separate applications, meet all the requirements, financial obligations included. It's a common misconception that trips people up.
Wow, that's good to know. Okay, what else? Any other potential pitfalls we should warn our listeners about?
Let's see, here's one that might come as a surprise. The HPI visa generally gives you the freedom to work for most employers. But there's a catch. It doesn't extend to professional athletes or sports coaches.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly specific.
Right. But it highlights how important it is to really understand the nuances of this visa category. What might seem like a minor detail can actually make or break your application.
Absolutely. And speaking of details, we've danced around it long enough. The elephant in the room, so to speak. This isn't a permanent ticket to the UK, is it? What happens when those 2 to 3 years are up?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Remember, we talked about the HPI visa as a springboard, a launching pad.
Right, a chance to test the waters, gain some experience, see where it leads.
Exactly. And if you're strategic and proactive during those initial years, the HPI can actually be an invaluable stepping stone to building a more permanent future in the UK.
So it's not necessarily the end of the road, more like a fork in the road.
Perfect way to put it.
Okay, so what are our options then? Let's say we're loving life in the UK, we're not ready to say cheerio just yet. What can we do?
Well, the UK has a whole range of other visa options, each one tailored to different circumstances, different long-term goals.
Okay, and which of those options are the most popular with HPI visa holders? The paths most traveled. So for our listeners who are already thinking ahead, what are some of the most common and viable options to explore?
One that consistently pops up is the skilled worker visa. It's specifically designed for those who've, really found their niche in the UK job market.
So they've been working maybe during those initial 2 to 3 years on the HPI?
Exactly. And a UK employer is willing to sponsor them, offer them a more permanent position.
Ah, so it's like the HPI visa gets your foot in the door, you showcase your skills, impress the right people, and then boom, the skilled worker visa gives you a chance to really set down roots.
Spot on. And remember how we talked about those global university rankings being a big deal for the HPI?
Yeah.
Well, with the skilled worker visa, it shifts a bit. It becomes less about where you studied and more about the actual experience you've gained, the expertise you bring to the table.
Which makes sense, right? You've spent a few years on the HPI, building your career, making those all-important connections, proving your worth. The UK wants to make it possible for you to stay and contribute long-term.
Exactly. And just so our listeners know, it's a points-based system, the skilled worker visa.
Points for what?
Things like your job, your salary, your English skills. But honestly, if you've been working hard, making the most of your HPI experience, chances are you're already well on your way to meeting those requirements.
That's good to know. But let's be real for a sec. Not every HPI story ends with settling down in the UK, does it? Sometimes those 2 to 3 years, it's a chapter, not the whole book.
That's very true. And you know what? That's perfectly okay. Even if it doesn't lead to permanent residency, the HPI visa is an incredible opportunity for growth.
Personally and professionally, even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about it. International experience, a broader network, a global perspective. These are things that benefit you no matter where you end up.
It's all about embracing the journey, right? And who knows, maybe those few years in the UK spark a new passion, open doors you never even knew existed, or just give you a fresh outlook on life back home.
You said it. The beauty of these kinds of experiences is that they have this way of shaping us in ways we never could have predicted.
And that's what makes this HPI visa so exciting. It's not just a visa, it's a chance to really push yourself, step outside that comfort zone, embrace the unknown, and just see where the adventure takes you.
I love that. Because at the end of the day, whether those 2 to 3 years become the foundation for a future in the UK or just an incredible chapter in your life, it's an experience you won't forget.
And hey, you might just inspire others to take the leap and embark on their own global adventures.
Now, wouldn't that be something?
It really would. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into the world of the HPI visa. Hopefully, our listeners found it insightful, informative, and maybe even a tad inspiring.
If there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. The world is a vast and exciting place to be. Don't let anything hold you back from exploring it.
The only limit is your own imagination. Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.